Europe's top human rights court has condemned Russia for the arrest and punishment of a Christian pastor. Reverend Donald Ossewaarde was arrested and fined for hosting a peaceful prayer gathering in his house in 2016. But just last week, the European Court of Human Rights called the arrest a clear breach of human rights. And joining us tonight with more on this is Dr. Felix Boellmann, Director of European Advocacy for Alliance Defending Freedom. Dr. Boellmann, great to be with you today. A lot to get to here, but first, I want to ask you about the timing of all of this. The Reverend, who is an American, was arrested 7 years ago. So why is the European Human Rights Court just getting around to condemning this action now?
Hello, Tracy. It's good to be with you. Yes, that's a very good question. The European Court of Human Rights does take its time. One has to understand that it only becomes active after all domestic remedies have been exhausted, which does take some time. But this case was brought to the court in Strasbourg in 2017, and it has indeed taken 6 years to decide it and was handed down the judgment on March 7th.
And can you talk to us more about his arrest? What sort of prayer gathering was it, and why did it offend the Russian authorities?
I think we can all agree that no one should be arrested for simply inviting people to their home to hold a peaceful prayer gathering and worship God. But that's precisely what happened to Don. Just to give you a little bit of background, in 2005, Don Ossewaarde, originally of Michigan, felt called to Russia as a Christian minister to spread the gospel there. And he did so for well over 10 years, and nobody touched him, really. He obtained permanent residence and obtained a house, and he invited people to this house to gather freely and pray to God. And then in 2016, Russia passed a new law to counter terrorism, as they said. And under this law, it became an offense to actually do what Don did, invite people to their home, and then to gather peacefully and pray, unless they were accredited with some other organizations and with the state. And that's Don was a freely practicing Christian missionary, and that's what got him into trouble.
Would you mind explaining this to us a little bit more, this anti-terrorism law, for those that aren't familiar?
Russia has a long-standing history of not particularly endorsing small and freely operating Christian organizations, and this applies to people like Don Ossewaarde in particular. Whatever they were coming after, it also affected Don Ossewaarde, as he was just inviting people to his home to hold prayer gatherings, and apparently that became forbidden. And it only took 2 months after that law became effective when 3 policemen showed up at his door while they were holding a gathering, and they kindly waited until the service was over, but then they asked him to come with them. He was fingerprinted, and in what we should call a mock trial, really been fined, and he had to pay a fine to the Russian government.
Yeah, we have about a minute left or so, but I do want to ask you this. You know, as Russia continues its war with Ukraine, objectors have held prayer services to end the war, and several religious leaders have spoken out. Do you think this case and the expressed disapproval of the European Court would set a precedent here and hold Russian authorities in check?
I think the case is really important in that it emphasizes a central principle of human rights law. It is a central aspect of freedom of religion to be able to gather freely. Now, unfortunately, Russia is no longer a member of the Council of Europe and is no longer under the jurisdiction of the court. But all the more, this judgment clearly shows that Russia cannot get away with that. And we're very grateful for this judgment, and we endorse it by all counts, because it shows that it's central that everybody should be free to gather and practice their religion, and this is enshrined in the European Convention on Human Rights, and that's what the court says, and it has a signal effect on all the countries that are members of the Council of Europe.
Well, Dr. Boellmann, thank you for taking the time to speak with us about this. We appreciate it. Pleasure to be with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.